Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for clicking on this video. And this is a new series. It's a 4-part series continuing on with Unmasking Mckamey with the new series Russ Mckamey. And it's crucial that we look into the interviews of last year and we really start delving deeper into the accusations from not one, not two, but 3 of Russ Mckamey's past partners, girlfriends, who have highlighted his inappropriate thoughts towards young children. Holly last year came out and made her statements. We're going to delve into her story and her statements, as well as Susan, Russ's recent girlfriend, who's now come forward with some absolutely unreal statements of things that Russ has said to her about her own children. And you're going to hear that just in a minute. I just want to say thank you to everyone for your continued support. YouTube gave me a strike and took away Hope Dies Here, my documentary. In a couple of days, there's going to be a video where you guys can help me get that back. And please, 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 when it happens, do what you can. Big thank you to everyone who's already bought the Christmas merch. Links are down in the description. And I hope you like the design this year. So listening to these interviews back from last year, and really Lindsay's story and everything resonated with me, and it's completely changed the course of this series. So in part 1, we're going to delve into Susan and Holly's accusations. In part 2, we're going to listen to Carol and to Lindsay. In parts 3 and 4, we're really going to start analyzing the evidence and start drawing conclusions. I've emailed you, Russ. Please respond. Now is the time. There's also a link to a playlist down in the description, which is music that I use on my live streams and also music that I listen to every day. It's my workshop playlist. So if you want to listen to that, there's a link in the description as well. Without any further ado, we're going to listen to this new statement that was made by Susan. And I genuinely feel that because of the distance and the relationship between Susan and Russ, that is what saved her from his clutches fully. Over this series, we're going to analyze what I believe are possible progressive patterns leading up to what could be a very dangerous situation for a child. Let's listen to Susan's statement. I just want to say how brave she is for coming forward, knowing the history of Mckamey Manor, Russ, and the fan base. Have a listen.
Today is November 25th, 2020. My name is Susan Kaplan. And in May of 2019, I was a 32-year-old single mother working as a client manager for a research and development company. My separated husband and I had 50-50 custody of my then 11-year-old son. One evening, I was watching a documentary series on Netflix. It was then I first saw and heard about Mckamey Manor. I did some research out of curiosity and was surprised to find that the owner of the manor, Russ Mckamey, had his phone number on his public website for the whole world to see. And in early June 2019, I gave the number a call. Russ answered in just a few rings. I totally did not expect this, but I was pleasantly surprised. And we got into a lengthy conversation where he was interviewing me to become a contestant. He told me that there was an opening that very weekend and that I should book a flight to be on the show. I was very excited for the thrill and for the opportunity, and I said, well, to hell with it. Why not? I booked my flight, and in the next 48 hours or so before my flight, Russ and I had several other conversations, both phone and FaceTime. Things did become a little flirtatious, but I was open to it, enjoying it even, and I was anticipating not just going to the manor, but I was also really excited to meet Russ Mckamey himself. And before I go further into this story, I want to make something very clear. I'm not making this statement for publicity. I'm not making this statement as a so-called hater. I'm making this statement out of concern and a sense of moral obligation for anyone dealing with Russ or individuals like him. As I continue, I think and I hope that you'll understand. Furthermore, I fully understand that after this is public, I may be viewed as a hater in some groups, and not only that. If anything, Russ should be issuing an apology to anyone he has treated or spoken to in a manner such as he did me. However, I seriously doubt that will be the case. Sadly, I think he's trapped in a victim mindset and he's incapable of remorse and also recognizing the damage of some of his actions and words. Continuing on, I don't want to focus too much on Mckamey Manor because that's not the purpose of my statement here. It's simply the medium through which the relationship between Russ and myself began. In only a month after meeting, we were very much infatuated with each other. I thought I was falling in love. He claimed to be in love. I was making an effort to see him every other weekend when I did not have my son, despite the distance. To let you know, I'm on the East Coast, right outside of Washington, D.C., and he's in the Midwest in Tennessee. So whether it was flying or driving, I was there as much as I could be. He was extremely charming, very charismatic. I would even describe him as being chivalrous in the beginning. And I definitely didn't care about our age difference. I've always been one to believe that love is about the hearts that are involved. He would do things like ask me to marry him and then tell me just to say yes to play along. And at first I thought things like that were very endearing. But let's fast forward to the end of July 2019 and the beginning of August 2019. This is when some things really started to bother me. He would ask me to do a lot of things that I wasn't comfortable with, and with some odd explanations as to why. At this point, he had also confessed some of his own struggles, which I'm not going to reveal here because that's personal to him. And I felt protective. I wanted to be supportive. And so I didn't share or confide some of these odd behaviors and experiences with anyone else at the time. But just to give you some examples, to give you an idea, and I have these written down. He made me change my clothes multiple times when I was getting dressed on many occasions because his mind wasn't in the right place when I put on a shirt. I'm a vegetarian. One time we were at a buffet and he told me I had to eat a bite of meat or he would turn into sand, which is bizarre. But I refused and told him I felt he was disrespecting my lifestyle, and he started crying, saying I did not love him. He made me pick his teeth with my nails in a public parking lot and got angry when I went to wash my hands afterwards. And he, on many occasions, wanted to chew food and make me eat it from his mouth. I did not want to, and I never did this, but every time he got upset at me for it. During manor activities and stunts, if there was something I did not want to do, he would tell me that if I did not do it, that I did not love him or trust him. There were many times where I obliged him uncomfortably, and he would just laugh. Like things like laying in the grass with a ski mask on my face, getting sprayed with water over and over, or submerging into cold water over and over. And in one particular activity, I confessed that I was actually afraid of dying, and he laughed and said that if I died, at least I would be on camera. And now we're going to get to the worst of it and the whole reason why I'm even speaking forward about this. Sometimes he would tell me that he had inappropriate thoughts about kids, and he couldn't help it. He would ask me to tell him that it was okay, or that nothing means nothing. His descriptions at first were really vague, and then slowly as time went by, became much more explicit. And in August of 2019 is when he started to talk about some of these thoughts involving my son. For example, is it wrong that I think about your son when I'm masturbating? Is it wrong that I think about your son's penis? Is it wrong that when I ejaculate, I say your son's name? Tell me it's okay. Tell me nothing means nothing. The first few times this happened, I was taken aback, but I had also been to the VA with him and spoken with his doctor to better understand his mental illness. The first time we went to the VA together, Russ specifically asked me not to talk about any of the thoughts he had about kids or my son because he was sure that they would put him away. Out of what I thought was love and understanding, I obliged at the time. I also need to make it clear that there were times I was really overwhelmed with conversations and interactions with him that I wouldn't return his calls for 2 to 3 days at a time. And he would message me incessantly, make it seem like it was my fault for not talking. And then when we did resume conversations, I was the one apologizing to him, made to feel like I was the one that had abandoned him. So lots of drama unfurled between September 2019 to the end of November 2019, where our relationship disintegrated essentially. Without getting into all of this, because I want to stick to the main point, Russ came to visit me early November 2019. Quite frankly, during this visit, it was the worst I'd experienced from him. There were a lot of issues going on with the Manor stuff on the side, which I know had him really stressed out, but this is no excuse. And I'm going to be blunt. Sexually, he was rougher than he'd ever been with me, leaving clear marks and bruises. He was also calling his other girlfriend daily while he was with me at my place, and I was supposed to say it was okay. He kept talking about sexual fantasies about kids. I was supposed to say it was okay. My son came up in these fantasies time and time again, and I was supposed to say it was okay. One of the nights he was with me, we were supposed to go to dinner with my son together. And I realized in that moment, I couldn't stand the idea of him meeting my son and looking at him with all the things that he'd said over and over, asking for my reassurance every time. I went to dinner with my son and left Russ behind at my apartment. I think it's then I finally realized how fucked up all of this was. And I could never let Russ be a father figure to my child. Also thinking especially the way he abandoned his own children and then villainized them for it. I mean, he's the parent. He's the parent. Unfortunately, I don't think that Russ knows how to take responsibility. In his world, in his mind, he is always the victim. It's one thing to have mental illness and have disturbing thoughts, but it is entirely another to explicitly express inappropriate thoughts about children, especially to a mother, where you include her child in those statements. Mental illness is very personal, and people that deal with it need to get the appropriate professional care. Instead of being honest with his doctors, Russ was taking out his worst, most nightmarish, dreadful thoughts on me. And I know I am not the only one that he's done this to. And when and if Russ hears this, he will feel that I have betrayed his trust. And this is not the case. I want him to get the help that he needs and be honest with his VA care team. Upon a lot of concern and a lot of reflection, I realized that Russ raised my mama bear protection radar from my own child, as I realized I never wanted him around my son for the worst fear that he could do potential detriment and damage. So my goal with this statement has several layers. I want to raise awareness about the reality of psychological abuse, mental illness notwithstanding. Russ has access to help that he does not fully utilize, and he is aware enough that he himself knows this. This is also not just about Russ. If someone is forcing anyone to do something they don't want to do, it's not okay. And if someone is talking about children sexually under any circumstance, it is not okay, ever, period. That person needs serious help. Some of the most dangerous people historically are also charismatic and charming. And there is no shame in coming forward with the truth, with the right intentions. I did not do this out of anger, and I don't say these things with bitterness. I speak my truth because I think it needs to be heard, and too many people feel silenced by the power of another's oppression and manipulation. I hope that this helps anyone that's been too afraid to speak. I hope that others feel brave enough to speak if they need or want to. And I sincerely hope that Russ and others like him get the help that they need. Thank you for listening.
Susan's story there is absolutely shocking, but isn't new. I mean, this is the exact thing that we heard from Holly last year. And we're going to get into Holly's statements from last year just in a moment. But Susan met Russ at 32 when Russ was in his 60s, lured in by charm, charisma, and this fame that just travels with him because of his manner and the status that he has with his cult following. Susan points out many things. Russ playing the victim, having no remorse, and just how quickly she was sucked in after a month of talking to him online. I think the most shocking thing is Russ's pattern of conditioning. And what scares me is Susan's a mum, and this, to me, in my knowledge, is the first time Russ would have had access to someone's child if they had moved in with him. Holly and Carol both living with Russ. I believe this long distance relationship and this distance is what allowed Susan to decompress, having distance from Russ, that saved her and her son. So was this a next stage in a predator's grooming of a parent for access to children? Who knows? Susan spoke of Russ's struggles and the abuse that took place when he was a younger child, and we're going to touch on that in Carol's interview later on. One thing is without a doubt, Susan is just another victim in this lifelong repeating pattern of abuse, control, and sadistic mind games that Russ likes to play. Forcing someone to eat meat, and then when they say no because they're a vegetarian, crying and saying that they don't love you is a tactic Russ uses throughout his entire life with every woman in his life. And you're going to hear more about that, like I say, from the interviews last year. It's really unbelievable how this video has sort of rolled out, because it's very easy just to repost Susan's story. But for me, there has to now be something bigger. We need to find a direction for the next video and where we're going to be looking in Russ's mindset. The conditioning of say it's okay, tell me it's okay, are my thoughts okay, just agree with me. For me, that is again conditioning. And it's interesting when Russ, at the start of the relationship, used this conditioning in a much more playful manner, asking Susan to marry him and just play along. By just playing along with that, Susan was being conditioned that, well, I never got married to him, so maybe he's never going to act on these impulses. Susan being smarter than the average cookie and having this decompression time away from Russ, I believe contributed to a lot of the reasons why she didn't fall fully into his trap. Russ having access to veteran medical services, and Susan being part of that, being forced to lie and not talk about his secret obsession with children for a good reason, Russ, because your therapist can do a mandatory report on you. And I think it's important that moving forward, everything we do is in the best interest of getting Russ help before he acts on anything, if ever. These are accusations made by past lovers, past girlfriends, and that's all we have to go on. Now, back in September, November time last year, that's when we were covering Russ interviewing his daughter, his past girlfriends, like I said, and the stress he was under was largely contributed to by this series. So apologies to you, Susan, for having to go through what you went through. Russ calling other women in front of and around his current partner is something that, yet again, that he has done throughout his entire life. This is a blatant disrespect, and you're going to hear how Russ's ego swelled through his fame rising and his inability to control his want for attention, subsequently resulting in Skype calls and frequent arguments with girlfriends and partners over his disrespect of them. So the next thing I'd like you to listen to is Holly's video statements from last year. Now, she did say that she no longer believes that Russ is a pedophile. Now, I believe that she said this based off of she doesn't believe he's an active pedophile, and I don't believe for a second that she's made up the stories about him in Walmart and other places like this. Listen to the similarities and just take note of everything she's saying. Not just about kids, but about the abuse, the control, the mind games, and the true horror that anyone who gets close to Russ Mckamey has to go through on a daily basis. Have a listen.
When I was when I was doing the hunt with him, he would tell me his sick, like, I guess to him, they were images, but I think they were fantasies. He would tell me his sick fantasies that he has with kids, with children. He's a passive pedophile. Now, when I say passive pedophile, meaning he would go to Walmart while I was there shopping, and he would just be looking at kids in like in dresses and skirts, girls, boys, teenagers. I mean, honest, yeah, he is. Now, this goes back to me back in the 90s of that domestic dispute back in San Diego. It was weird because in San Diego, there were a box of pictures that he wanted me to help move, and he wanted me to clean off the pictures because he thought the pictures were dirty. And I went through all these family photos he wanted me to wipe because his OCD was so extreme. But then I saw pictures of him he took of his boy, and his boy was fully clothed, but it was weird. Like the child would just pose in like a very sexual manner, like show his bottom to the camera. I was like, what the fuck is this? Yeah, he fantasizes about kids, and whatever woman is in his clutches, he's going to tell his dirty fantasies to, and he's going to say, it doesn't mean anything that I thought that I put my face down that little girl's crotch or shit like that. He'll deny it to this day, but the truth is I came back so many times to protect the children in that neighborhood from the real boogeyman. He would choke me out all the time to build up my neck or whatever, but that's a felon to choke people. It's a felon. He would bite me. He would bite hard on me. He left my back with bruises. And one of the contestants saw my bruises. They're like, what happened? He did deprive me of food. I mean, I remember times I would beg. I'm like, can we please go into town and get food? I don't have a vehicle. And so I walked to the town to get food. And I would carry a big backpack because he wouldn't get off his lazy ass to go get food. And there was a time where I would just eat ice in the freezer because there was dog food. There was plenty of dog food, but nothing for me and to eat. And there was food, and there was times where he wouldn't eat. It was weird, and so that was a way to control. I'll control you. I'll just starve you. and the dog was dying of cancer, and it was my birthday the very next day. Well, that night, I was sleeping next to the dog, sleeping bags, and he did something so creepy. I mean, it was creepy. He went and sang happy birthday to me while I was sleeping next to a dying dog. But this was so sick. The very next day when we had to put Rocky down, and, you know, you didn't have to put him down right away. You could have just kept him, making him feel comfortable, but he knew that, well, since it's a birthday, I'm going to really make her remember a birthday. And so we took the dog to the vet, and they said, look, we have to put him down because he's dying. And I understand, to end the dog's suffering. But when they injected the dog, I think they injected with potassium, what he did, he said, no, I was crying. I was in tears. You know, I've never been next to a dog that was going to sleep. I didn't want to see that, but he's all, no, you're going to see this because I don't want Rocky to die alone. Because if he goes alone, then that just shows no guilt. His favorite weapon of modality is guilt. So he made me, told me to pick up Rocky's face while the dog was dying after he just got injected. And he started taking pictures of me holding the dying dog. When I was bawling, I was crying, and he was just filming and taking pictures. I don't want him to hurt a kid. I'm very sorry that he was hurt as a kid, but like they said, it's a vicious cycle. If you're molested as a child, then as an adult, if you don't get healed from that trauma, or and if you choose to go ahead and be an evildoer and hurt kids, and yeah, I mean, I'm not justifying what he does, but he needs to get help. He needs to be locked away in a loony bin. He does.
Listening to that statement by Holly and how she's basically insisted that when Ross has a partner, he's going to tell them about these fantasies. And that is exactly what happens with Susan. When she talked about Walmart, and I talk about this progressive path of predators, was Russ at a stage where he was comfortable being outside looking at children? Was this stage one? And was Susan, a mother, the next phase in his plan? Russ has this ability to test the waters with a woman, and when the testing has been pushed too much, instantly move on to someone else and reinvent and begin testing the water after a grace period of charisma and charm. You also heard Holly repeat again this, it's okay, it doesn't mean anything, just say it's okay, just say it's okay, again mirrored in Susan's statement. The fact that this is two separate women a year apart gives this credibility to me. The fact that these women are stepping forward for the safety of others. It's just a shame that maybe Susan didn't get to Holly's story before she was snared online by Russ's charm. Bruises, bite marks, being choked. Again, this rough, aggressive sex that seems to have evolved from this passionate beginning that these women go through, and this repeating pattern of desensitizing and trying to normalize the thoughts in his head. Being controlled with food, not having a car or a mobile phone was the tactics used on Holly to keep her isolated and to allow him to further break her down as he continued to play out his fantasies of control and abuse and mental torture on anyone who gets close to him. The next thing we're going to listen to are segments from Holly's interview last year in the Mckamey Manor series. And again, these are prevalent points. The full series is linked down below. Have a listen to Holly talking freely once again about the control and abuse that she suffered with Russ Mckamey. Have a listen.
I would like to say, first off and foremost, I am not jumping on any bandwagon. This is not a vendetta against my tormentor. This is not a revenge from a jealous ex. No, I want people that are currently in his life to know how dangerous this man is. I don't want anybody to get hurt the way I was hurt with my experience with my tormentor. So no, this is not a revenge tactic. This isn't out of jealousy or vendetta. I got him because I wanted to be a contestant on the San Diego Mckamey Manor, and I wanted to be a contestant, and I got scared and I backed out. I was scared at the last minute, and from there on out, he started texting me, and Carol was absolutely factual, 100% with her story about how he would Skype women to lure them in. He would text me stuff to kind of like, he'd come off as very charming. He would say, "Oh, you're beautiful." Russ abused Carol. So he lied to me from the get-go. And that's what Russ is currently doing to his, I believe, girlfriend right now. So he started this whole smear campaign against me that I have schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever, smear campaign to discredit me. I had to jump into the fields for to get away from it, and the police found me. And then I told the police, and they brought in a psychologist to interview me. I told them everything what you heard on the video, my interview, my interview. I told that to the psychologist because he put me in the mental hospital. He threw me in the state hospital at Lawrence County Hospital, and I told the psychologist, which they grabbed at 3 a.m. You don't just grab a psychologist at 3 a.m. My case was hot. The criminal investigator wanted me out of there. He wanted to buy me a plane ticket, get out of there, because they were investigating him. He, I believe in brainwash. He had me brainwashed. He had, I believe, in coercion. So I was brainwashed and coerced. He forced me to work at the show. He threatened me with his gun, saying, "I'm going to shoot you if you don't do your show." So yeah, I was scared for my life. For my life. He is a very sick, dangerous man, and to this day I am in I am in fear for my life from him.
The things that Holly's went through are mirrored in what Carol, Susan, and also what Ross's family, his daughter, his wife, and his son all went through. He seems to have this toxic mindset, or whether he's just a complete psychopath. Either way you look at it, mental health plays a big part in this. Next, we're going to hear about sections from Carol's interview from last year, where you're just going to hear, once again, this pattern reaffirmed. After we've heard Carol's story, we're going to be moving on to something a little bit different and trying to sort of educate ourselves a little bit on the mindsets of individuals like Russ. But before that, here's Carol's story. Pay attention once again to the similarities, because it's like you're hearing the same life lived by these 3 different women.